The first time I noticed something was off about Mara's apartment. It was the deadbolt. It didn't line up cleanly with the strike plate unless you jiggled the door and pulled while you turn. She showed me on our third date. "You have to do this little dance," she said, hip against the wood, wrist cocked, and I laughed because everything about her seemed like that. An angle, a rhythm only she knew. She lived on the second floor of a building that used to be a hotel. Tall ceilings, wavy glass windows, a hallway that smelled perpetually like laundry and old wood. The door still had a tarnished brass number plate above the peephole. 211, though half the paint had flaked off, so it looked like Z07. I started calling it the zoo, and she pretended to be offended, then insisted I feed the giraffes when I came over, which meant bringing her gummy worms from the corner store. We'd been seeing each other for 4 months. That awkward, sweet spot where you've met each other's friends, but not each other's parents, where you know exactly how someone takes their coffee, but not yet the exact names and shapes of all their ghosts. Mara's quiet in the way people call mysterious until you actually sit with her long enough to hear how loud her head is. She tells stories sideways. She will describe the color of the sky for 5 minutes instead of saying she had a bad day. But she's also the kind of person who stays on the phone when your car won't start, who brings you a Tupperware of stew because I made too much when you know she made extra on purpose. I'd never met her ex, but I knew he existed like a dent in a wall that you just forget is there. His name was Lucas. They dated for 2 years. He was the reason the strike plate was a little bent. One night during a fight, he'd slammed the door so hard the frame shifted. "Not violent," she'd said. "Not like that. Just dramatic." It was one of those explanations that is both a promise and an apology. The first time she told me about the key, it was casual. "I keep meaning to ask for it back," she said, rummaging in her junk drawer for a lighter. "You know how it is." I didn't exactly, but I nodded like I did, because it felt like the kind of thing you don't press. She changed the subject to a video of a cat that looks like a loaf of bread, and I let it go. There were little signs, if I'm being honest, that I stepped around like they were puddles I didn't want to look too closely at. Once, a hoodie appeared on the back of a chair that I didn't recognize. Navy, soft, with a tiny logo over the heart. "Oh," she said, without looking at it. "That's old." Another time I found a toothbrush in the medicine cabinet that wasn't mine. "Back up," she said. "I forget things." She always had a plausible sentence and a smile you could live in. I spend most weekends at her place because my own apartment is a converted attic where you can hear the neighbors sneeze. Saturday mornings, we walk to the bakery where the owner insists on calling everyone kid, no matter their age. And Mara orders a croissant and then eats half of mine. She puts her hair up with a pencil. She tucks her feet under my thigh on the couch like she's rooting herself into me. It felt like the first thing in a long time that wasn't complicated. And then last Tuesday, my boss gave me the day off entirely by accident. He emailed at 6 a.m. "Server migration means don't touch anything. Go live your life." I stared at the screen, stunned by this sudden gift of hours. Mara had an early shift at the clinic. She left a couple of cute domestic texts. "There's coffee in the French press if you come over," and a photo of the apartment window catching the morning light with the caption, "Zo7 says hi." I decided to surprise her with lunch, to be that person for once. The guy who shows up with tacos and a stupid grin, and maybe a small flower I steal from the vase at the bodega when Mr. K isn't looking. On the walk over, the city felt like it had been ironed. The sidewalks were damp from overnight rain, and the air smelled like basil from a produce truck parked half on the bike lane. I rehearsed in my head the joke I'd make when she came home and saw the picnic on her coffee table. Something lame like, "I kidnapped your afternoon," which would make her roll her eyes and kiss me anyway. The building door was propped open with a brick the way it always is, because the buzzer is temperamental. The hallway light flickered. I jogged up the stairs, flipping the key she'd given me weeks ago around my finger. It's engraved with a tiny number 2 and has a small crack in the plastic head. When I reached 207, I did the knock we'd invented. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Even though I knew she was at work. Habit or superstition, I'm not sure. I slid the key in, did our little deadbolt dance, and pushed the door open. 2 things hit me at once. The smell of her vanilla candle and the sound of water running. Not drippy, not a faucet left on, but a shower. My first thought was, weird. Did she come home? Did she take a morning shower and forget to blow out the candle? I stepped inside, kicking the door shut with my heel. The living room was mostly the same chaos as usual. Plants leaning toward the window, a stack of books on the arm of the couch, one sock on the coffee table like a clue. But there was also a pair of shoes by the mat that weren't ours. They were men's shoes, scuffed leather, size big enough to make me feel small. I set the tacos down too carefully, like any sudden movement might spook the moment. "Mara," I called, trying to make it sound casual. My voice bounced off the old plaster like I had thrown it. No answer. The sound of water paused, then stopped. Silence filled in like wet cement. I'm not proud of the way my hands shook. I walked toward the bathroom because that's where the sound had been. The bathroom door was half closed, steam curling around the edge. "Hey," I said, not sure who I was talking to. I put my palm to the door and pushed. He was there like a bad magic trick. A man I'd only seen in 2 photos on Mara's Instagram, suddenly 3-dimensional in front of me. He stood with a towel around his waist, dripping onto the bath mat I'd bought her as a joke. It says, "You look good," in bubble letters. He looked surprised, then annoyed, then something else, like he'd seen my type before and considered me an inconvenience. "Can I help you?" he said, which is a wild thing to say in someone else's apartment when you're half naked and dripping. "Who are you?" I said, even though my stomach already knew. He looked me up and down in that way some men do, inventorying, pricing. "Lucas," he said. "Who are you?" I swallowed. I'm with Mara." "Cool," he said, like we were picking teams for a rec soccer game. He reached past me for a t-shirt hanging on the back of the door like it lived there. "She's at work." "I know," I said, heat rising up my neck. "Why are you here?" He shrugged, as if the question were almost funny. "I left my charger," he said. "Didn't think it'd be a big deal." "The key," I said, because sometimes your brain can only hold one noun at a time. "You still have a key?" He didn't even blink. "Yeah," he said. "We didn't do the whole key return ceremony. It happens." "Not like this," I said, but my voice didn't sound like a person I would listen to. He reached for a bottle of cologne on the shelf and spritzed his neck like the smell of him wasn't already too much in the room. I could see his reflection in the mirror, a jaw that had probably been called strong, a scar on his eyebrow that begged for a story. He looked like 1,000 versions of a man I've been mistaken for and resented anyway. "You should go," he said, not unkindly, but with a finality that made me feel like a trespasser in the place I'd been falling in love. The room seemed to tilt. I took a step back so I wouldn't touch him. He brushed past me, water beating on his shoulder, and walked into the living room like he was walking through an airport he owned. I followed because what else do you do when your life steps outside and asks you to catch up? He went to the little entry table where Mara keeps her mail and picked up a charger, the cheap white kind with a frayed cord I swear I'd seen last week. He slid it into his pocket like he was dropping a coin into a fountain. He didn't look at the tacos on the coffee table. He didn't look at me. "How often do you do this?" I asked, and I didn't recognize my own voice. He paused at the door and turned. "Do what?" "Let yourself in." He raised his eyebrows. "When I need to. We're cool." He said it with a curious softness, like he was talking to a skittish animal. "You should chill, man." "I'm not your man," I said, louder than the room deserved. He put his hand on the knob. Something in me snapped. Not a big break, just a fine hairline fracture that makes a sound only you can hear. "Mara and I are together," I said, because sometimes the truth feels like its own weapon. He smiled, not cruel, but knowing. "Sure," he said. "For now." He opened the door. "Tell her I'll text." And then he was gone, like he was never there. The door clicked behind him with a softness I hated. I stood in the middle of the living room, dripping steam into the quiet he'd left. The candle flickered like it was pretending to be normal. On the coffee table, the tacos waited, sweating into their foil. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mara's name, the photo of her face I took when we were both a little drunk and happy, and the city was something we could hold. "Hey," her text said. "How's your rogue day off? Want to come by later?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing. "I'm here," I wrote. "We need to talk." 3 dots. The most terrifying punctuation in the world. Then, About what? I looked at the door, at the tiny crack in the plastic head of the key on the table, at the wet footprints across the tile that were already fading. My chest went tight, like I'd swallowed something too big. About Lucas, I typed and hit send. When Mara finally came home that afternoon, the apartment door opened slowly, like she was bracing herself. I was still sitting on her couch, the tacos long cold, my knee bouncing in a nervous rhythm. I'd replayed the scene 100 times while waiting, the sound of the shower cutting off, the way Lucas said, "We're cool," the damp outline of his footprints drying into ghosts on her tile floor. "Mara," I said when she stepped in. She froze when she saw me, her hand still on the doorknob. "Hey," she said carefully. "You scared me. What are you doing here?" I held up my phone. "You told me to come by later. I figured lunch counted as later." She shut the door slowly, her expression cautious. "Okay, why do you sound weird?" I didn't know how to start, so I went with blunt. "Lucas was here." Her face went pale so fast I thought she might faint. "What?" "This morning. I came by with lunch, and he was in your shower." She blinked once, twice, then let out a breathy laugh that sounded like she was trying to delay panic. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about him being here. Like, wet hair, towel, talking to me like I was the one trespassing." Her bag slid off her shoulder. No, that doesn't make sense. He wouldn't." She cut herself off. "Mara." She rubbed her face, pacing. "Okay, slow down. He was here? Like in the apartment?" "Yes," I said, sharper than I meant to. "He said he came to grab his charger." Her eyes darted toward the entry table, the same spot where he'd pocketed it. "Oh my God," she whispered. I stood up. "You told me he still had a key. I didn't think you meant he used it." "I didn't think he would," she said quickly. "We broke up months ago. He was supposed to give it back. She stopped, biting her lip. "I guess I never made him." "Why not?" That question sat between us like a loaded gun. She looked down. "Because it was easier not to fight. When we ended things, he was emotional. I told him I needed space, and he said okay. I didn't want to make it worse by demanding the key." "Easier not to fight," I repeated. "So he still comes and goes?" "No," she said. "I didn't even know. I swear he hasn't been around since before you and I got serious." "Mara, he showered here." Her hands trembled. "I know. Jesus, I know. This is insane." I watched her, trying to read her. Fear, guilt, confusion. Maybe all three. "Has he done this before?" She shook her head. "Not that I know of." "Not that you know of," I said quietly. She flinched. "You think I'm lying?" "I don't know what to think," I admitted. That hurt her. I could see it. Her eyes watered, but she blinked the tears back. "I'll call him," she said suddenly, grabbing her phone. "Mara, no, I need to know what the hell he was doing here." She scrolled, hit call, and put the phone on speaker. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hey," came his voice, too casual. "Lucas," she said sharp. "Were you at my apartment today?" There was a pause. Yeah. I told you I might swing by for my charger." "You what?" Her voice cracked. "You don't live here anymore." "I didn't think it was a big deal," he said. "I still have a few things there." "You have nothing here. You left months ago." I could hear the smirk in his tone. "Well, apparently not everything, since my charger was still there." "Lucas," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't just come into my place like that." He laughed softly. "Relax. You act like I broke in. I have a key." "That's not yours anymore," she snapped. "Then maybe you should have asked for it back," he said, his voice suddenly flat. "You didn't. So don't act surprised." Something in her face crumpled. "You can't do this." "Do what? You moved on. Good for you. I just needed a charger. Tell your new boyfriend to chill. He looked like he was about to call the cops." "I should have," I said loud enough for him to hear. He chuckled. "Cute." "Lucas," Mara said, voice shaking. "I'm serious. Don't come back here. Ever." He didn't respond. The line went quiet. Then, "Sure thing, Mara," he said softly and hung up. She stood there staring at her phone, her breathing uneven. "He's never done anything like that before," she whispered. "I swear." Okay, I said quietly, but you need to change the locks. Today. I will. I started pacing because standing still made me want to scream. Mara, he was so comfortable here. Like this is still his place. Like I was intruding. She nodded slowly, eyes distant. That's how he is. He just decides what's his. Something cold ran through me. Did he ever? I stopped, not sure how to ask what I wanted to know. She seemed to understand anyway. He wasn't violent, she said. Not physically. Just, he had a way of making me feel small, like everything was my fault, like saying no was being dramatic. I swallowed. And you still have his stuff? Just a few things, she said, then looked at the empty space on the entry table where the charger had been. Not anymore, I guess. I rubbed my face. You should tell your landlord too, and maybe get a security camera. She nodded, dazed. Yeah, okay. We sat in silence for a while, both of us still vibrating from the call. Finally, she said, I'm sorry. For what? For putting you in that situation. For not handling it sooner. I shook my head. I just don't understand how he still feels entitled to walk in here. Because that's who he is, she said, voice small. He thinks everything he's ever touched still belongs to him. That sentence stuck to me like glue. We went to the hardware store that night. I helped her pick out a new deadbolt, one that clicked cleanly into place without any dance. When we finished installing it, she leaned against the door and whispered, It feels different now. But I couldn't shake the image of him standing where I was now, barefoot, dripping, claiming space like oxygen. Before I left, I asked, What if he comes back? She hesitated. Then he'll find out he's locked out. I wanted that to be enough. I wanted to believe that a new lock could erase old ghosts. But when I got home that night, I realized something chilling. Lucas hadn't been surprised to see me there. He'd known my name. And as I replayed it in my head, I realized something else. He'd said, Tell her I'll text. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept staring at my phone, half expecting a message from Mara saying he'd texted, or worse, that he'd shown up again. I must have refreshed her Instagram 5 times, even though I knew she hadn't posted anything. Around 2 a.m., I got up and paced my apartment. Every sound, the creak of the radiator, a car door slamming outside, made my chest tighten. I'd always thought of myself as calm, rational, the kind of guy who handles problems one step at a time. But that night, my mind wouldn't stop replaying his voice. Tell her I'll text. The next morning, Mara called. I could tell from her tone that she'd been awake for a while too. He texted me, she said, voice flat. My stomach sank. What did he say? He sent a picture. I sat down. Of what? Of the door. My door. From last night. The old lock. I didn't speak for a second. I could hear her breathing through the line, shaky but steadying herself. He must have taken it before we changed it, she said. But the caption just said, You'll miss me. Mara, I said slowly, that's not normal. That's not just some breakup thing. I know, she said quietly. I blocked him. I saved the screenshot. I'm going to file a police report. Do you want me to go with you? There was a pause. Would you? Of course, I said. I'm not letting you deal with this alone. We met at the precinct near her apartment around noon. She looked pale but composed. Jeans, hoodie, no makeup. The kind of outfit you wear when you just need to survive the day. She showed the officer the screenshot, explained the situation, how he still had a key until last night. The officer nodded, took notes, and said they'd file a report, but that without a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do beyond that. When we stepped outside, Mara exhaled hard. That was useless. Hey, I said softly. At least it's on record now. That's something. Yeah, she murmured, staring down at her phone. Something. I wanted to fix it, to make her feel safe again. But what do you say to someone whose sense of security has been dismantled by a single knock at their door, or worse, the sound of a key turning in it? I stayed with her that night. She insisted she was fine, but I could see her eyes darting to the window every few minutes. I cooked pasta, tried to lighten the mood. We watched a stupid comedy and she laughed a little, really laughed for the first time all day. Around midnight, she finally fell asleep on my chest. I stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the building, footsteps upstairs, a pipe rattling, the faint hum of the fridge. I kept thinking about how Lucas had moved through this same space, how easy it was for him. Around 3 a.m., I heard something. A soft tap at the window, just once. Then silence. I froze. The window faced the fire escape, 2 stories up. My first thought was that it was just wind or a bird, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded deliberate. I eased Mara off me and stood up quietly. The curtains were drawn, but a small gap between them let in the glow of the streetlight. I could see the faint outline of a shadow outside. Tall, still. My heart started pounding. I picked up my phone, turned on the flashlight, and flicked it toward the window. The light caught a face for half a second, just enough to make out the outline of eyes, the glint of wet hair. Then the shadow moved fast down the fire escape. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. Mara stirred. "What?" I turned back to her. Someone was outside. Her eyes shot open. "What do you mean outside?" "On the fire escape." She jumped up, rushing to the window, but I stopped her. "Don't," I said. "He's gone." She was shaking now, her hands covering her mouth. "It was him." "I think so," I said quietly. "We're calling the cops again." The next hour was a blur. Sirens, flashlights, officers asking the same questions. They checked the fire escape, but of course he was long gone. One of them said they'd add it to the report and suggested she stay somewhere else for the night. We ended up at my place, both of us sitting on the couch, too wired to sleep. "He's escalating," I said finally. Mara nodded, hugging her knees. "He used to do this. Show up after fights. Just stand outside, not yelling, not knocking, just waiting." "That's stalking," I said. "That's not romantic or dramatic. It's dangerous." "I know," she said softly. "I just thought it was over." The next few days passed in a fog. She stayed with me, only going back to her place once to grab essentials, with me right behind her. Every creak made her flinch. She kept checking the peephole before unlocking the door, even though she'd changed the locks. Then one evening while I was cooking dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. She froze when she saw the notification. It was a text from an unknown number. "Miss me yet?" I felt my stomach twist. "He got a new number," I said. Mara's face went blank. "He's not going to stop, is he?" "We'll make him stop," I said, though I had no idea how. That night I slept with one ear open again, every sound amplified. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a notification from my building's front camera, the one that pings whenever someone walks past the door. I opened it. A grainy, low-light image appeared. Lucas, standing outside my building, looking straight at the camera and smiling. I didn't wake Mara right away. I just stared at the image on my phone. That eerie, pixelated smile frozen mid-grain, like he was proud of being caught. The timestamp read 3:46 a.m. I checked the feed again, refreshing it over and over, hoping maybe the camera had glitched. Maybe I was seeing a stranger who happened to look like him. But it was him. The jawline, the scar on the eyebrow, even that stupid jacket I remembered from her closet, the one she said she borrowed from an old boyfriend years ago. I finally whispered, "Mara." She groaned, half asleep. "What time is it?" "Almost 4. You need to see something." She sat up, squinting as I handed her my phone. When she saw the picture, all the color drained from her face. I know." She held the phone tighter. "How did he even find your building?" "I don't know," I said, throat tight. "But he was standing right outside. He looked straight into the camera. Like he wanted you to see him." "Exactly." We just sat there for a minute, the silence thick. Then she whispered, "What if he's still out there?" I went to the window, careful to move the curtain just enough to peek through. The street below was quiet, just a couple of cars, an empty sidewalk glistening from last night's rain. No movement, no one. I turned back to her. "We're calling the police again." She nodded slowly, but I could tell she was spiraling. Her breathing got shallow. "He's watching us," she said, barely audible. "He's actually watching us." I dialed 911, explaining everything. The history, the photo, the stalking. The dispatcher told us an officer would come by, but the tone was routine, detached. Like this was just another line on a list. By the time the cops arrived 20 minutes later, the sun was starting to bleed into the skyline. Two uniformed officers stood in my doorway. A younger guy who looked fresh out of training and an older one with tired eyes. I showed them the photo, the previous report number, everything. The younger officer frowned at the image. "You sure that's the same guy?" Mara glared at him. "Yes, he dated me for 2 years. I think I'd recognize his face." "Right," he said quickly. "Sorry, I just meant, well, these low-light cameras can make people look different." I could feel Mara's frustration boiling. "He was at my apartment a week ago. He broke in. He texted me. He was outside his new boyfriend's building last night." The older cop sighed. "Look, we can't prove intent from a photo alone. But given the pattern, we'll file an incident report and escalate it for a restraining order." "Pattern," Mara repeated bitterly. "That's what you call it?" The younger one nodded at me. "You should install a secondary lock. Maybe add another camera by your window." When they left, Mara sat on the edge of the couch, staring at her hands. "He's enjoying this," she said finally. "He likes knowing we can't stop him." I knelt beside her. "We will stop him. I don't care what it takes." She looked at me, eyes wide and tired. "He used to say that I'd never really get away, that he'd always know where I was. I thought it was just words." It hit me then how much of her was still tangled in him. Not by choice, but by the way fear rewires you, makes you keep one foot ready to run. For the next few days, we were on edge. I started walking her to and from work. We kept the curtains drawn. Every time her phone buzzed, she jumped. Then Friday night came. We were at my place watching a movie, trying to be normal. Mara had started to relax. She was curled against me, half asleep. Around 11 p.m., I got up to grab water. As I passed the door, I heard something. Not loud, just the faintest metallic click. The sound of a key turning in the lock. Every muscle in my body went cold. I turned slowly. The handle moved, just a fraction, but enough to see it twitch. "Mara," I whispered, my voice tight. She sat up immediately. "What is it?" I didn't answer. I just pointed. The handle twisted again. Once. Twice. Then stopped. I crept forward, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. My building has a deadbolt and a chain. Both were locked. Whoever was on the other side was trying the bottom lock. The regular one that uses a key. He had a copy. "Mara," I said quietly, "get behind the couch. Now." She didn't argue. She crawled over the armrest and ducked down, clutching her phone. I grabbed the closest thing I could. A heavy glass vase from the shelf. My palms were slick. The handle stilled again. Silence. Then suddenly, a soft, deliberate knock. 3 times. Knock. 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 "Mara," came the voice. Calm. Too calm. "Open the door." It was him. She gasped softly from behind the couch. I forced my voice steady. "You need to leave." No answer. "I'm calling the police," I said. Still silence. Then almost conversationally, "I just want to talk to her." I felt rage burn through the fear. "You don't get to want anything," I snapped. "You broke into her home. You've been stalking her. You're done." There was a pause. Then, quietly, he said, "You don't understand her like I do." Mara let out a small sob. That sound must have broken something in him. Or in me. Because the next second, he rattled the handle hard, the door shaking against the frame. The chain held. The sound echoed in the apartment like a gunshot. I yelled, "Police are on their way!" Even though I hadn't dialed yet. Then, silence again. Footsteps retreating down the hall. I waited, counting seconds until I heard the slam of the building's front door. Only then did I exhale. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the vase. Mara crawled out from behind the couch, tears streaking her face. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. I pulled her into my arms. "You won't have to. I promise." I called 911 again, this time my voice sharp, furious. They sent officers, took another report, and said they'd patrol the area. But as we sat there afterward, lights flashing faintly outside, I realized something that made my stomach twist. He hadn't just known where she lived. He knew exactly where I lived, and he had a key that worked. That night after the cops left, Mara and I just sat there in silence. The room still smelled faintly like metal from where the doorknob had rattled, and I couldn't stop staring at it, that small, ordinary piece of hardware that suddenly felt like a threat. I'd always thought of home as a place where the air shifts differently, where you can finally exhale, but now the air felt stale and claustrophobic, like it belonged to someone else. Mara's hands were shaking. "He has a key," she whispered again, like she needed to say it out loud to make it real. "I'm changing the locks tomorrow," I said automatically. "First thing." She nodded, but her eyes were unfocused. "He'll just find another way in." "No," I said firmly. "He won't. Not again." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. She stayed up the rest of the night, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a blanket around her shoulders, scrolling through her phone, deleting old messages, blocking new numbers that looked vaguely familiar. Every time her screen lit up, I tensed. Around dawn, she finally fell asleep sitting up. I didn't even try. I just watched the door until the sky turned gray. The next day, I left work early and called a locksmith. The guy was in his 60s, gruff but kind. "Breakup situation?" he asked, eyeing the old deadbolt as he unpacked his tools. "Something like that," I said. He nodded. "Happens more than you'd think." He worked fast, replacing the locks, testing each key twice. When he handed me the new set, he said, "Don't let anyone copy these. Not even your girlfriend. No offense." "None taken," I said quietly. By the time Mara came over that evening, I'd added a chain and a secondary bolt. She looked relieved for the first time in days. "It looks safe," she said. "It is," I promised. "He's done getting near us." But that night, while we were making dinner, her phone buzzed again. She froze mid-stir. Another unknown number. "Did you think a new lock would stop me?" She dropped the spoon. Sauce splattered across the counter. "Oh my God!" I grabbed the phone, my stomach twisting. There was a second message already incoming. "You shouldn't have let him move in. It's not his space." "Mara," I said slowly, "he's talking about me." She backed against the counter, breathing fast. "He must be watching." I went to the window and yanked the curtains closed. The street below was empty, just dim yellow light spilling from the lampposts. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being seen. I called the police again, read the texts out loud, gave them the number. The officer on the line said they'd add it to the file, maybe get a warrant if it continued. If. That word felt like a dare. The next morning, I went to a hardware store and bought a camera system. One of those motion sensor ones you can monitor from your phone. I installed them all over the place, by the front door, by the windows, even the stairwell. Every small sound now had a face. Every creak had evidence. For a few days, things went quiet. Mara started sleeping through the night again. I started to believe we'd finally scared him off. We talked about moving, somewhere new, maybe a different neighborhood, maybe even out of the city altogether. She said, "I just want to stop looking over my shoulder." But then on Wednesday night, the camera app sent a notification. Motion detected. Living room. I froze. Mara was sitting beside me on the couch. We both looked at each other. I opened the live feed. For a moment, the screen was black, then static. Then suddenly, the camera tilted, like it had been touched. The image went blurry, and then a face filled the frame, far too close. Just eyes and a mouth. Lucas. He was inside. Mara screamed. I jumped up, heart racing, and grabbed the nearest thing I could. A heavy lamp. "Call the cops," I yelled. She was already dialing, hands shaking. "He's here! He's inside!" I crept toward the hallway. The light from the kitchen cast long shadows. I could hear him. Slow footsteps. The soft creak of floorboards. He wasn't rushing. He was walking like he belonged there. "Lucas," I shouted, "get the hell out!" No answer. Just that quiet, deliberate movement. I stepped forward, gripping the lamp like a weapon. "You come any closer, I swear." A voice interrupted me from the dark. Calm, almost amused. "You shouldn't have moved her toothbrush." My stomach turned. "What?" He stepped halfway into view, his face lit by the glow of the streetlight through the curtain. His expression wasn't angry. It was something worse, serene. "That was my side of the sink," he said softly. "You moved her stuff over. You're trying to erase me." Get out, I said again, louder this time. He tilted his head. You don't belong here. I do. I could hear sirens faintly in the distance. Or maybe I imagined them. Mara was crying, whispering into the phone. Then without warning, Lucas moved. Fast. He lunged toward me, knocking the lamp from my hand. We slammed into the wall, the sound exploding through the room. He was stronger than I expected. All adrenaline and obsession. I grabbed at his arm, shoving him off, yelling for Mara to stay back. Stop, she screamed. Lucas, stop! He froze at her voice, just for a second. Long enough for me to shove him again, this time toward the door. He stumbled, hit the frame, and I slammed the deadbolt open. Go, I yelled. Go, or I'll end you right here. He stared at me, breathing hard. Then with that same eerie calm, he said, You'll never understand her. And he ran. The sirens were real after all. They arrived minutes later. The police swept the building, took statements, collected the footage. They caught him 2 blocks away, still on foot. He had the copy of my old key on him. When they put him in the back of the car, he looked right at us through the window, smiling. That smile would follow me for weeks. That night, Mara sat on the floor shaking while I held her. It's over, I whispered, but my voice didn't sound convincing. Because even though they had him in custody, the damage was already done. We'd changed locks, changed numbers, changed everything we could. Except one thing. The feeling that, no matter how many locks we replaced, someone could still be inside. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was quiet. But it wasn't peaceful. The silence felt artificial, stretched too thin, like the calm that comes after a storm, but before you realize what's been destroyed. Mara didn't speak for a long time after the police left. She just sat on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, eyes fixed on the door as if it might move again. Her knuckles were white. Every now and then, she'd flinch at a sound. The pipes, the wind, a car outside. I wanted to say something comforting, but every sentence I thought of felt hollow. It's over. He's gone. You're safe now. None of it sounded true. Finally, she whispered, Do you think they'll keep him this time? I exhaled. They caught him trespassing, with a copy of my key. That's breaking and entering. He'll at least get charges filed. But how long? She asked. A night? A week? I didn't answer because I didn't know. She laughed bitterly. He'll get out. He always gets out. I sat next to her and took her hand. Then we'll make sure he never comes near you again. She turned her head, eyes glistening. You can't promise that. I opened my mouth to argue but closed it again. She was right. That night she slept in my arms, trembling every time the floor creaked. I didn't sleep at all. I kept thinking about the way he'd looked at us through the police car window. Calm, almost satisfied. Like he'd managed to leave something behind that we couldn't scrub out. The next morning we got a call from the police. The officer told us they were charging Lucas with unlawful entry, harassment, and violating a restraining order. Mara had filed for one immediately after the first break-in. He'd been held overnight but was already out on bail. When I hung up, my stomach dropped. He's out, I said quietly. Mara just stared at me. Already? Already? She stood up, pacing. I can't do this anymore, Alex. I can't keep living like this. I know, I said. So let's get out of here. She stopped pacing. You mean move? I mean leave, I said. New city, new apartment, new everything. He can't haunt places we've never been. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, but then she just nodded. Okay, she whispered. We spent the next few days packing. Every box we sealed felt like reclaiming something. Our privacy, our sanity, our right to breathe. I found her standing in the bathroom at one point, staring at the sink where he'd said, You moved her toothbrush. She threw the toothbrush away. We left the city 3 days later, driving 5 hours north to a smaller town where she'd found a short-term rental. The house was small and quiet, surrounded by pines. When we pulled into the driveway, Mara looked at me and said, I can breathe here. For the first time in a long while, she smiled. We unpacked slowly, finding small rituals again. Coffee in the mornings, walks before sunset, sleeping with the window open. The fear didn't vanish overnight, but it dulled. Every day that passed without a message or knock felt like a tiny victory. A month went by, then 2. No word from him. I started to believe maybe it was over. Then one afternoon, Mara got an email. The subject line just said, "You can't hide forever." There was no address, no name, just a single attachment, a photo of her sitting on our new porch, taken from the tree line. She dropped her phone like it had burned her. "He found us," she whispered. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. I picked up the phone, opened the email again. The timestamp was from less than an hour ago. He was close. I called the police immediately, explaining everything. The past incidents, the restraining order, the new location. They told us to stay inside, lock the doors, and that a unit was on its way. We waited. Every creak in the house sounded like a footstep outside. I pulled the curtains closed and checked the windows twice. Then from the back of the house I heard it. A sound that I'll never forget. A soft, deliberate tap on the glass. Once, twice, 3 times. "Mara," I whispered. She was frozen, eyes wide. "He's here." I moved toward the window, my whole body shaking. "Stay here," I said. "Don't." But I was already moving. The tapping came again, a little louder this time. I flicked off the lights and crept closer, heart hammering. The world narrowed to just that sound, the rhythmic, mocking tap. I reached the window, pulled the curtain back an inch. He was standing outside in the rain, just a few feet away. Lucas. He looked thinner, wilder. His eyes locked on mine immediately. He didn't smile this time. He just mouthed something slowly, deliberately. 3 words. "This isn't over." Then he turned and disappeared into the trees. By the time the police arrived 15 minutes later, he was gone. Again. They searched the property, the woods, even neighboring houses. Nothing. The officer told us they'd issue another warrant, patrol the area. But his tone made it clear what he didn't say out loud. That people like Lucas are hard to catch and even harder to contain. That night, Mara sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. "He'll never stop," she said. "He'll just keep finding me." I knelt in front of her. "Then I'll keep standing between you and him," I said. She looked at me for a long time. "You can't do that forever." "I can try." We didn't sleep again that night. I stayed awake by the window, gripping the baseball bat I'd found in the closet, eyes scanning the tree line until the first light of morning. When the sun rose, I realized something chilling. He'd picked this house, this town, just like the others, because he wasn't chasing her by accident. He was hunting her. The morning after that night in the woods, everything looked too calm. Birds chirped. Sunlight filtered through the blinds. But every normal sound felt like a trick. Mara barely moved. She sat at the kitchen table, hair tangled, staring at her untouched coffee. I called work and told them I wasn't coming in for a while. My boss didn't ask questions. Maybe it was my voice. Maybe it was the kind of exhaustion that doesn't sound like a hangover, but like survival. We had 2 cops stationed outside for most of the day, driving slowly up and down the road. It helped for a while, but every hour that passed without them catching him made me feel like we were living on borrowed time. When the sun went down, I pulled the blinds closed again. Mara whispered, "He knows we called the police. He'll wait until they're gone." "He's not getting near you again," I said automatically. She looked up at me, eyes rimmed red. "You can't promise that." And she was right, I couldn't. That night I suggested we go stay in a hotel, somewhere busy, somewhere with people around. She shook her head. "Running won't stop him," she said. "He'll just follow." I opened my mouth to argue but stopped when I saw how she was gripping her phone, like it was her only lifeline. Around midnight, she fell asleep on the couch. I stayed up, scrolling through her messages, trying to find any clue we'd missed, any contact, any number, any trace of where he could be hiding. That's when I noticed the drafts folder in her email. Not sent messages, drafts, dozens of them, all blank except for one. I clicked it. It wasn't blank. It was a half-written email addressed to Lucas. The words froze me. "I don't know what you want from me anymore. You said you just needed space, but then you said you couldn't let go. I keep trying to move on, but you won't let me. I'm scared, but I still don't hate you. Please just stop showing up. Please don't hurt him." I stared at the screen. The timestamp was from the night before I caught him in her apartment. Mara, I whispered. She stirred, groggy. What? I turned the laptop toward her. What is this? Her face went pale. Oh my God, I forgot that was even there. Did you send this? No, she said quickly. I typed it and deleted it. I was going to send it, but I never did. You were talking to him. I wasn't, she said, her voice rising. I was scared. He kept texting me from different numbers, showing up at work, following me. I thought if I could just say the right thing, if I could sound calm, maybe he'd stop. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But reading those words, I still don't hate you, felt like getting punched. Mara, I said softly, did you ever tell him where we moved? Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Did you? Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean to. I felt something in my chest collapse. How? He called me from a number I didn't recognize a few days after we moved. I thought it was the utilities company. He said he just wanted to talk. He sounded calm, like maybe he'd finally let go. I didn't tell him the address, I swear. But he asked about the drive north, about the pine trees, about the way the porch looked in the pictures I'd posted. Mara, I said slowly, you posted pictures? She nodded, trembling. Just one. The porch. I didn't even tag the location. I sank into the chair across from her, the weight of it all settling like sandbags on my chest. He found you from that, I said. He's that obsessive. I didn't think. I know, I interrupted, softer now. I know. We sat there in silence. Outside, the crickets sounded too loud. Then her phone buzzed. We both froze. Unknown number. The message said, you shouldn't keep secrets from me. Mara dropped the phone like it was alive. Oh my God, she whispered. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I picked up the phone, opened the message. A second one was already coming in. He's lying to you. What the hell, I muttered. A third message. Ask him why he really showed up that day. I looked up at Mara, confused. What does that mean? She shook her head. I don't. Then she stopped. Her expression shifted. Wait, you said you were just stopping by with lunch. What? That day you found him in my apartment. You said you had the day off, but you told me you had a full week of work. Mara, I said slowly, you think I knew he'd be there? She looked torn between anger and fear. Did you? No, Jesus, no. You think I planned to walk in on your ex naked in your bathroom? I don't know what to think anymore, she said, voice cracking. Before I could respond, the phone buzzed again. You're both liars. That's when I noticed the message timestamps. Each one came within seconds of something we just said. He was listening. Mara, I whispered, he's outside. She gasped, looking toward the window. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app, switching to the live feed from the porch camera I'd installed. Static for a moment, then movement. The screen flickered, and there he was again. Lucas, standing at the edge of the porch, a phone in his hand, his eyes fixed directly on the camera. And this time he wasn't smiling. He was crying. Then he spoke, just loud enough for the microphone to catch it. I told you, he whispered, you don't get to erase me. The video froze as the connection dropped. Mara was sobbing now, her hands shaking uncontrollably. We have to go. Now. I nodded, already grabbing the car keys. We ran, out the back door, through the yard, into the car. I locked the doors and started the engine. My hands were slick with sweat. As we pulled out of the driveway, the headlights swept across the trees. And for a brief second, I saw him, standing there, watching us leave. He didn't move. He didn't run. He just watched. We drove for hours that night, mostly in silence. The highway unspooled in front of us like a black ribbon that would never end. Every pair of headlights behind us made my heart leap. Every car that stayed too long in the rear view felt like him. Mara didn't speak. She just stared out the window, fingers clenched tight around her phone. At some point, we crossed into another state without realizing it. I pulled into a 24-hour diner somewhere outside a small town called Cedar Hill. The sign flickered and buzzed. The E in diner half burnt out. We sat in a booth near the back, under the kind of dim yellow light that makes everything look older than it is. Mara ordered coffee but didn't drink it. I tried to eat a piece of toast and couldn't swallow. It was 3 a.m. when she finally said something. I can't do this anymore. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I know, I said. No, she said, shaking her head. You don't. I mean any of it. The running, the cameras, the constant fear. She looked at me, eyes hollow. This is how he wins. He makes me live inside his nightmare. I reached across the table. He's not going to win. We'll keep going. We'll find somewhere safe. There is no safe, Alex, she snapped. Heads turned from another booth. She lowered her voice. He'll just keep finding me. He always has. The words hung between us like smoke. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that monsters get caught, that justice works, but I couldn't, because deep down, I didn't believe it either. We stayed there until sunrise. When we finally got back in the car, the world looked washed out and fragile. Mara leaned her head against the window and said quietly, I think I need to disappear. What do you mean? I mean I need to start over. New name, new everything. Like I never existed. That's extreme, I said, though the word felt hollow. He's not going to stop, Alex. She looked at me, tears spilling now. If I stay Mara, he'll always find me. Maybe if I'm someone else, he'll finally lose me. I gripped the wheel tighter. Then we'll figure it out together. She gave a small, sad smile. You'd really do that? Leave everything behind? I already did the moment I met you, I said, and it was true. We drove until we reached a quiet town near the border, a place so small it didn't even have a proper motel. Just a bed and breakfast run by an old couple who didn't ask questions. We paid in cash. Mara used a fake last name. For the first time in months, no one knew where we were. For the next few days, things almost felt normal. We walked by the lake. We ate cheap diner food. We laughed, carefully like we were afraid to break the sound. The air was colder there, crisp and still, and the pine trees looked almost like sentinels guarding us. But the calm never lasted long. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Mara's phone buzzed. We'd changed numbers, wiped social media, everything. But somehow it rang anyway. Unknown caller. Her hand trembled. She didn't answer. The call ended. Then another came. Then another. Finally, I grabbed the phone and hit accept. I didn't say anything. For a few seconds, there was only breathing. Then his voice, quiet, almost tender. You took her name, he said, but she's still mine. I ended the call immediately, heart pounding. Mara was shaking. How does he still have it? She whispered. How does he always find me? I didn't have an answer, but that was the night she decided. We went to the authorities the next morning. State police this time, a different jurisdiction. We brought every screenshot, every video, every call log. The officer who interviewed us listened carefully, took notes, and said words I hadn't heard yet. This qualifies for federal escalation. They issued a nationwide protection order, flagged his name, contacted cybercrime units to trace the number. For the first time, it felt like someone was really listening. 2 weeks later, we got the call. They'd found him. He'd been living in an old camper 2 towns over, parked near the woods. Inside, they found dozens of photos of Mara, printouts, candid shots from months ago. Some from her old apartment, some from my building, and some, God, I can still see it, taken through the window of our new place. There was also a small notebook, pages and pages of handwriting, obsessive, possessive, her name written over and over, and mine, crossed out in thick black marker. When the officer told us, Mara broke down. She cried harder than I'd ever seen, but it wasn't just fear, it was release, like a scream that had been waiting in her throat for months. They arrested him on multiple charges: stalking, harassment, breaking and entering, possession of illegal surveillance equipment. His bail was denied this time. We sat in the courtroom weeks later, hands clasped tight. When they brought him in, he didn't look at her, not once. His face was blank, hollow. When the judge read the sentence, 5 years minimum with mandatory psychiatric treatment, Mara's shoulders finally dropped. For the first time, she looked lighter. Afterwards, she turned to me and said quietly, I can finally breathe again. We moved one more time, for good. Different names on the mailbox, no social media, no traces, just a small cabin near the mountains where the nights are quiet and the air smells like pine. Sometimes she still wakes up in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced she heard tapping on the glass. and I'll hold her, whispering, "It's over. He's gone." But sometimes when I close my own eyes, I see his face in the reflection of the window. The way he looked that night in the rain, tears mixing with the storm, whispering, "You don't get to erase me." And I wonder if people like him ever really go away. Maybe they just live in the dark corners of the mind, waiting for the next sound at the door.